I realized that I was a vicious supporting actress because of a dream. In the dream, my world is just a book. In the book, the male-led Xavier has to sacrifice his marriage for his family's business. He brought up the marriage alliance with my father. At that time, I had just broken up with a poor boy and was left with a lot of illnesses. My father thought I was disgraceful and couldn't wait to push me out. For 3 years, Xavier and I have been respectful to each other but have different dreams. But in this year, he met someone who made his heart flutter and then proposed divorce to me. On a very ordinary night, I had a dream. I dreamed that I was a supporting actress in a book. Although I am a supporting actress, not much is written about me. It only says that before Xavier met the female lead Yvonne, he had a marriage. Because it was a family alliance, he had no feelings for his wife. Later, he and Yvonne liked each other and wanted to divorce his unlikable wife. But the wife pestered him endlessly. Xavier was extremely annoyed. Finally, he secretly changed his wife's medicine and let her die in her sleep. Although the dream was very real, I still had doubts about it. Until a few days later, I saw Xavier having a meal with a girl in a restaurant. Judging from her clothes, the girl should not be a client, a business partner, or a relative or friend I have met. I got closer and saw her face clearly. Oh, it was the girl I had dreamed about. Xavier's official partner. I didn't go any further. I just looked at Xavier. He looked very happy. His expression was relaxed. But his every move was extremely gentlemanly. Pouring tea, picking up dishes, and peeling shrimps. Xavier was born into a wealthy family and was carefully educated. Therefore, everything he does is extremely pleasing to the eye. Seeing that she was a bit restrained, he made her laugh. Seeing the corners of her mouth rise, he smiled even more happily than her. This is a Xavier I have never seen before. There is indeed a very subtle sting in my heart. And I am a bit lost. But it's definitely not because of love. Love is not enough to make me become like in the dream. Hysterical and full of hostility. I just feel a bit annoyed. The life that has finally gotten on the right track will be disrupted again soon. And I can't stop it. I left quietly. I thought that maybe in 2 days, Xavier would come to me and ask for a divorce. Just as the book says, Xavier and I have no deep feelings. But after all, we have lived under the same roof for 3 years. If he has an affair, at least I should have the right to know. Right? But I waited for several days. And he didn't come to me to ask for a divorce. On the contrary, because I went to deliver documents to him, I learned about the girl. Her name is Yvonne. She is the new secretary hired by Xavier's company. A fresh graduate in her early 20s. Full of youth and vitality, and enthusiasm. She is much better than me. When I stepped into Xavier's office, she was reporting work to Xavier. The two were very close. Xavier was facing the door. As soon as I opened the door, he quickly stood up. Rather than welcoming me, it was more like an action to avoid suspicion subconsciously because of guilt. I pretended not to know anything and handed him the documents, and was about to leave. But he called out to me. I looked back at him, and heard him ask hesitantly, "Do you want to have lunch together at noon?" I glanced at Yvonne meaningfully and refused with a smile. "No need. You should be very busy. I won't disturb you. I have been to his company so many times. And he has never asked me to stay for a meal. What's wrong with him today? A farewell meal? Then it's completely unnecessary." On the way home, I always felt that someone was following me. But when I looked back, I didn't see anyone, so I had to think that I was overthinking. But can the feeling of being watched be wrong? I looked back again. The bustling street was full of people coming and going. And no one seemed suspicious. A 6 or 7-year-old little boy ran over, holding a huge cotton candy in his hand. He said to me in a childish voice, "Auntie, here's candy for you. Dad said that eating candy will make you feel better." Oh, it was just a child. His little hand held it up hard. And his arm was shaking. I quickly took the cotton candy. Originally, I wanted to give him something in return. But when I rummaged through my bag, there were only the medicine I have to take every day, and a bunch of keys. So I took off the small cloth doll on the key that had been washed many times and gave it to him. I squatted down and said, "Thank you. Then can Auntie give you this small doll? Next time, Auntie will treat you to a small cake." The little boy took the doll with both hands and thanked me obediently. Looking up, he asked, "Auntie, is this your favorite doll?" "Yes," I said. "Look, it's a little bear. Squeezing its belly will make it sing." This was given to Auntie by a very important person. He loudly promised, "Then I will also take good care of the little bear." After saying that, the child ran towards a tall figure in the distance. The figure was far away, and I could only vaguely see him stretch out his hands and pick up the little boy. I lowered my head and took a bite of the cotton candy. The sweetness was inferior. I can't remember why I used to like eating this thing so much. Xavier didn't mention divorce at all, and went to and from work as usual every day. One morning before Xavier left, I tied his tie for him. As usual, he didn't say a word. After getting ready, he was about to leave. I called out to him, "Xavier." He turned his head. "Huh?" The report of the last physical examination came out. "Can you accompany me to the re-examination?" He nodded. "Okay. I'll go directly from the company." "What time?" "Appointment is at 10. I'll wait for you in the hall." He indicated that he knew. According to the dream, I know that he probably won't come, because Yvonne will have a moderate car accident on her way to work and slightly fracture her leg. Xavier is busy taking her shoe surgery, and completely forgets about accompanying me. It wasn't until he was handling Yvonne's hospitalization procedures and saw me that he remembered this. At that time, I had been foolishly waiting in the hall for 2 hours, firmly believing that with his character, if he promised, he would definitely come. 5. I'm not as stupid as in the dream. At 10 o'clock, I arrived at the hospital as promised. As expected, he wasn't there. I waited symbolically for a few minutes, and then took the film myself to see the doctor. When it was time for my afternoon nap, Xavier finally remembered that he had broken his promise and called me. "Are you home? How was the physical examination?" I glanced at the physical examination report lying on the table and lied. It's fine." He paused for a moment, and then stammered to explain, "I suddenly had an urgent matter today, and forgot to accompany you. I'm sorry." "It doesn't matter. Then rest at home." He said to me in a slightly firm tone. "Tonight, I have something to say to you." "Okay." 6. When Xavier came home, he was holding a file bag. He sat on the sofa, unwound the white cotton thread on the file bag circle by circle, took out the documents inside, and pushed them in front of me. "Let's get a divorce." He pointed to the documents on the table. "Sign it. These are the properties that I will transfer to your name after the divorce. Even if we separate, you will have no worries about food and clothing in the future." I said, "I don't want your property." He said, "I know. But at that time, your father and I had agreed that when the roundabout project is completed, everything will return to its original state. Half of my property will be given to you. And even if we don't mention this, I can't let you be with me for 3 years for nothing." Oh, it turns out that everything was negotiated before marriage. I nodded in agreement. "Yes. You are so generous. She will definitely be very happy when she marries you in the future." There was a hint of embarrassment on Xavier's face. "When did you know?" "Not long ago." His face turned a little red. And in embarrassment and anger, he reproached me, "Aren't you the same? You still can't forget that poor guy until now." 7. The poor guy he mentioned is called Forrest. He is the only person I have ever liked. From 18 to 23 years old. For 5 years. Originally, I was going to marry him. At that time, in order to be with him, my father was extremely angry. His prejudice against people inferior to himself is very obvious and deeply ingrained. And he never believes that a girl marrying down can have any happiness. I said to him, but Forrest is very capable. He knows many things and is also very hardworking. He will definitely be successful in the future. My father said, do you know how much time it costs to wait for a penniless young man to struggle on his own? Besides, can you guarantee that he will definitely be successful? I know what my father said is right and applies to the vast majority of people. But I still insisted that Forrest would definitely not disappoint. I had a big fight with my father and resolutely followed Forrest to work hard in other places. At the beginning, we were very happy. Forrest's boss highly appreciates him and lets him lead a team to do projects. Both of us are working hard. Occasionally on weekends, we will go on trips or have a big meal. After leaving my parents, I have never been overly embarrassed by money. Instead, I have a sense of freedom. But it wasn't long before I had a heart problem. Forrest put aside his work to accompany me to see a doctor. We went from small hospitals to big hospitals. Finally, the doctor said, it can be treated. But the surgery and various post-operative expenses require hundreds of thousands. God knows that at that time, Forrest and I had just graduated. We needed money everywhere for renting a house and daily expenses. Therefore, we didn't have much savings. I thought there was still a long time ahead. And saving money was also a long-term thing. I asked Forrest with a sad face, what should we do? He said, take some medicine first. I'll raise money. When I borrow enough money, we'll have the surgery. But the surgery was never done. I felt more and more uncomfortable and finally had to be hospitalized. Forrest was so busy that he couldn't get away. I was alone in the hospital. I felt uncomfortable physically, lonely, and a little scared. I always felt that if I accidentally died, Forrest might not even know. So when Forrest came, I asked him, Forrest, asked the doctor, can you treat me quickly? My chest hurts so much that I can't sleep. Forrest hung his head and didn't speak. I held up his head and only then found that his tears were pooling in his eyes. With a blink, they would fall. His voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Sorry. I still haven't raised enough money for the surgery. I've tried hard. I've borrowed from everyone I know. But it's still not enough. He hugged me and put his head on my neck, helplessly asking, Serafina, why is 200,000 so much? I still can't raise enough no matter what. During that period, I especially liked the large, fluffy rolled cotton candy at the night market. I would buy it to eat every time I went out. When Forrest came to the hospital to accompany me one day, he brought me a marshmallow. After I finished eating it, he discussed with me, Serafina, go home. 9 at first. I didn't understand what he meant. Then he repeated it again. Serafina, go home. He wiped the sugar residue from the corner of my mouth with his hand and said to me in the gentlest tone in the world, let's break up. Okay? I froze for a moment. Then shrank my shoulders and asked him, is it because I'm sick and a burden to you? Forrest said, no. It's because I'm so incompetent. I can't save you. He said, Serafina, 200,000 is as difficult as reaching the sky for me. But for your dad, it's just a very small amount of money. A drop in the bucket. Serafina, Forrest said to me crying. I can't do anything. I'm sorry. Since I was a child, I have never been distressed by money. 20,000 yuan was perhaps just the money for me to buy a bag or a piece of clothing in the past. But now, it can save my life. I finally understood what my dad said to me on the day I quarreled with him. The huge gap between people is usually not felt. Only when encountering difficulties can it be deeply felt. I finally understood the meaning of these words. I lay in the hospital bed and thought about it all night. Forrest was there to take care of me. His tall figure was squeezed on a narrow and short bed. I grabbed his sleeve and pulled it. I said, Forrest, I don't want to break up with you. Otherwise, let's not treat it anymore. The doctor said that as long as I keep taking medicine, there is no life-threatening danger. Let's have conservative treatment like this. Forrest was silent in the darkness for a long time. Then he pressed me back under the quilt and said, "You go to sleep quickly now." 77 in the end. I didn't win against Forrest, because I had an attack in front of him. It was the most serious one. I couldn't catch my breath. My face was blue. My whole body was soaked. I curled up like a shrimp. Forrest was terrified. He hunched over and staggered to find the doctor. If he still had a trace of hesitation before, then after that day, he was determined to break up with me. At that time, I had lost several pounds. He could pick me up with one hand around my waist. I clung tightly to his shoulder and kept crying. I said, "You don't love me anymore. I don't want to leave." He said nothing. Like a dull stone. He carried me into the car at that time. We didn't have a car yet. The car was also rented by him temporarily. Then he drove to the outside of my family's villa. 12 I remember it was a very hot day. The cicadas were chirping nonstop, which was so annoying. My dad deliberately made him wait at the door for a long time. During those few minutes of waiting, he kept walking back and forth, nervously clasping his fingers together. When my dad came out, without saying anything, he knelt down first. Then, like confessing, he said he was wrong and I was wrong. His eyes were moist, and tears flowed down his sunburned red cheeks. Sitting in the car, my heart was torn apart. For a moment, I thought it would be better if I just died. Then everyone would be relieved. I heard him say to my dad, "Let her go home. I will never see her again." The only time in my life I saw someone show an expression more humble than begging actually came from my lover. And the root cause is myself. Later, I really didn't see him again. He was right. The day after I went home, my parents arranged a hospital and found the vice president to perform the surgery for me personally. Soon, I had the surgery completed. Forrest begged everyone in his circle, but he still couldn't gather the basic treatment cost of 200,000 yuan. But my dad swiped his card at the hospital window without blinking an eye and sent high-end tonics to my ward every day without repetition. I suddenly felt that both Forrest and I were naively a bit sad at that time. 13 after being discharged from the hospital, I tried to find Forrest. I even thought of an excuse in advance. Even if we break up, then I have to return the money for my hospitalization to you. I kept calling his phone, but he had already changed his number. I looked for a private detective. The other party only told me that they found the flight Forrest took out of the province before. So you see, when a person really wants to hide, others can't find him easily. Later, my dad arranged for me to marry Xavier. Because of this marriage, my dad and the Yan family jointly contracted a large public project. They made a lot of money. Xavier's company was brought back to life and became the leading enterprise in the city at one stroke. He is said to be the most outstanding young entrepreneur in the city. And today, 3 years later, this entrepreneur is going to divorce me. 14 I pulled myself out of my memories and looked at Xavier in front of me. In fact, even after having the surgery, the doctor had cautioned me not to be emotionally excited and to maintain a peaceful state of mind. But I really can't hear a single bad word about Forrest. Especially, what is Xavier? In what role and from what position does he look down on Forrest? Forrest was willing to lower his face and borrow money for me. He was willing to work during the day to earn money to buy medicine for me, and still come to take care of me at night. He was willing to send me home properly, and then disappear without a trace with tens of thousands of yuan of debt on his back. He was willing to kneel down for me to my dad who had never shown a good face to him. What about Xavier? He married me just to save his company. After marrying me, he didn't treat me well. After using me up, he kicked me aside. The book only says that Xavier had to choose a family marriage for business reasons and married a woman who is not very likable. But the book doesn't say that his unlikable wife has never found him likable either. Since marriage has been regarded as a business and one relies on selling marriage to save one's career, neither winning nor losing is glorious. He is such a person. Therefore, I really don't understand how he has the nerve to mention Forrest. 15. I neatly signed the divorce agreement. Xavier was satisfied. He heaved a sigh of relief and looked up at me. This was the first time since we had known each other for so long that he looked at me with such an eye free from negative emotions. He said, "Thank you." I was too lazy to pay attention to him, and perfunctorily said, "I wish you happiness." He couldn't hide his smile. Before leaving, he also said to me, "This house is left to you. You can continue to live in it, or sell it as you wish." I said okay. The door opened and closed, and the room became very quiet. I sat on the sofa and thought a lot. Originally, I didn't have any thoughts about this marriage. But on a sudden recollection, I had already lived a life without anyone's concern and human touch for 3 years. I felt a sudden sadness well up. I took out my phone and contacted a real estate agent. This house that doesn't carry any affection is a burden if kept. 16. If Xavier had even a bit of sincerity towards me, perhaps I wouldn't have lied to him. I would tell him, "Look, my physical examination is not very good. The doctor said I'm going to become demented. In fact, I've been forgetting things a lot in the past few months. Did you notice? I don't want to rely on Xavier because we have no affection. If I rely on him, it will make me seem very weak and I will have no dignity at all in front of him. But perhaps it's because illness makes people more helpless and lack a sense of security. And Xavier is my husband. The only person who can establish some connection with me, and give me some care based on this connection. So I subconsciously wanted to rely on him. But he has someone he likes and naturally won't come to take care of me. I still remember that at the wedding, the master of ceremonies asked him, whether in poverty or wealth, in sickness or in health, will you always love her, protect her until the end of life? Xavier also looked at me affectionately and said, yes. In fact, he didn't want to at all. So even if I told him the truth, maybe he would only say with a straight face, Serafina, it's meaningless to talk about this now. 17. When I got the divorce certificate, I suddenly felt like a duckweed. From the past to now, I have never had a place to belong. Perhaps during the years when Forrest was by my side, I once had everything: love, expectation, and a home. But then he disappeared. I finally couldn't hold it in and squatted down and cried at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. What should I do? I will gradually forget everything in the future and become a muddle-headed person. No one is with me and no one takes care of me. I am not a very strong person and will feel lonely. 18. After divorcing Xavier, I didn't go back to my parents' home. I was very afraid of the storm I would have to face after going back. I didn't like my relatives showing expressions of disgust and giving me the cold shoulder. So as long as I didn't see it, it would be fine. I took the property I got and moved from the city to the countryside. I lived in a bungalow. As for me, even if I am a supporting role for others in the whole world, one day, I will finally live for myself. I bought a pot of hydrangeas and took great care of it and talked to it. But I'm not very good at growing flowers. Therefore, in September, it slowly shed all its leaves and lost its vitality. I felt like I had lost another good friend. Therefore, from that day on, I stopped growing flowers anymore. When winter came, I heard that Xavier and Devon got married. The wedding was very grand. All the famous people went. And I gradually found something wrong in my life. 19. At first, just someone swept the fallen leaves outside my door, and the houses on my left and right were all empty. Then I went to the vegetable garden to weed. When I remembered that I had left the small hoe in the vegetable garden, and was about to go out to look for it, I found the small hoe quietly leaning in a corner by the door. Because my memory has been bad recently. So looking at that small hoe, I began to wonder if I actually bought it back, and put it aside and forgot again. Then there is no wireless network in the house. I was going to go to the town to find someone to install it. But before I could find someone, a certain operator came to the countryside to do publicity, and could install network cables door to door. The strangest thing is that the light at my gate was broken. I tried to change it by standing on a stool. But even when I stretched out my arm, I couldn't reach the light bulb. And now, when I accidentally touched the switch, the light came on. I stood at the door and looked up in surprise. The wind in winter is very cold. But looking at that small light bulb emitting a warm yellow halo, I shrank my neck into my scarf and suddenly didn't want to go back into the house so quickly. After about a minute, I shouted, "Forrest." It was very quiet around. I muttered in a low voice, "If you don't come out soon, I will freeze to death." Still no one. In this way, I began to doubt myself. After all, if it was really Forrest, if I showed weakness, he would fall for it. Could it be that there is really some kind-hearted person in the village? Swept the annoying fallen leaves for me, brought back my small hoe for me, and changed the light bulb for me? But I find it very strange. For so many years, only Forrest can know what's on my mind. Only he knows what I need. Could there be a second person like this in the world? Or is it really just a coincidence? Unable to figure it out, I had to give up and go back to my room. 20 I have lived in the countryside for quite a few days. There has always been someone secretly bringing me conveniences. It's like a roundworm living in my stomach. As soon as I need something or want something, I can get it immediately. When the first snow fell, my mother came to see me from the city. She was dressed elegantly and luxuriously. She waved for the driver to go back, and then looked at me, who was wearing a big flowery cotton-padded jacket and had mud on one hand. I don't really understand what maternal love is like. When I was very young, my mother didn't give me too many caring gazes. She always asked me about my grades, how far I had learned in piano, and why my ranking had dropped again. She never asked me if I was happy at school, if anyone bullied me, and never asked me if I had added clothes when it was cold. Even when my father wanted to marry me to a person I didn't know or understand at all, she remained silent. Perhaps it is precisely because of the lack of family affection. When Forrest was good to me after I grew up, I was extremely happy and decided that it was him. Now when we look at each other like this, I thought she would show a look of disgust. But she just stood there, looking at me intently and asking why I didn't go home even after getting divorced. When I didn't answer, she took a few steps forward, hugged me in her arms, and asked if I was cold spending the winter here, if there was air conditioning here, and if I was happy growing vegetables here. When my life has come to such an embarrassing situation, the role of mother suddenly comes back to life and comes to show concern for me. I know it's wrong to think like this, but I really feel that she is very nauseating. But I still said softly to her, "It's good. I'm very happy here. I am also very sad to have such a lukewarm relationship with my own mother. But I can't help it. Mom, thank you for coming to see me. You are my first guest. It's very likely that after some time, I will forget you. If you come at that time, you will definitely be very sad." 21 Since I returned to the countryside, I haven't been to the hospital. I know that my memory is declining. So I started to mark things. I even bought a box of chalk and wrote things on the road, on stones, and at the door. I write my name and home address on a note and carry it with me in my bag, because I'm afraid that I will forget how to go home one day after going out. I develop and place photos of close people in conspicuous places in case I don't recognize them when I see them in person one day. After my mother came, I hurriedly put these things away in a drawer. She stayed with me for 3 days and didn't notice it at all. She just occasionally laughed at me and said, "Why have you forgotten what was just said?" I said, "Life is too comfortable, and makes my brain lazy." 22 After my mother left, I started to prepare things for New Year's Day. I rode a small electric bike to the town to buy wall hangings. Because the road was slippery, I didn't control the electric bike well and fell into a ditch by the field. The electric bike was pressing on my leg and I couldn't move. There is only a little water after snow melting and some weeds in that ditch. And it is not deep. But I was lying on my back. So I couldn't see if there was anyone on the road above. It's not a big problem. I thought that as long as I heard someone or a vehicle passing by, I could shout for help. 23 When I heard the sound of a private car passing by, I shouted help. Casually. I didn't have much hope because private cars are fast and have good ceiling. The people in the car may not be able to hear it at all. But the car stopped. Someone leaned out from the other side of the road and then ran down against the light. The electric bike was lifted to one side. I was picked up horizontally. He has a very familiar pine fragrance. I have only smelled this smell on one person. Forrest. 24 On the way to the hospital. The atmosphere in the car was always very gloomy. I lowered my head and picked at my fingers. Forrest placed my leg on his lap and examined it very carefully. When I was thinking in my heart several times, why haven't we arrived yet? The young man driving in front finally braked. He slightly turned his head and said to Forrest, "President Shane. We're here." Forrest responded with a, ahem. He got out of the car and carried me into the hospital. Throughout the whole process of my examination, Forrest had a straight face and a tense body. Looking very nervous. Actually, I'm fine at all. I just sprained my ankle a bit. Although the small electric bike numbed my leg. Fortunately, I was wearing thick clothes and didn't even have a single scratch. In fact, I was also a little afraid when Forrest had a straight face. Because he is very different from before. Before we broke up, Forrest was still a young man who had just entered society not long ago. Without exaggeration, there was still a look of innocent stupidity in his eyes. Now his eyes are as calm as an ancient well, and his pitch-black pupils seem like an unfathomable abyss. When he doesn't speak, I can hardly tell what he is thinking. We have all become different from before. I got divorced and fell ill. He has become powerful, stable, and less talkative. It always seems inappropriate to just look at each other in silence like this. So I took the initiative to call him. "Forrest," Ryan said to an NPC, who was about to pounce from a corner with a smile. "Come on, dude. She's timid. Don't scare her." I peeked out from beside. Sure enough, that NPC obediently backed off. I breathed a sigh of relief. After we went through all the procedures of playing in the haunted house, the initial fear in our hearts actually decreased a lot. When we came out and saw the sun, our mood suddenly became very pleasant. He raised an eyebrow and exaggerated said, "I didn't lie to you. Exciting, right?" I glared at him hard. His hand was still tightly holding my hand, pretending nothing had happened. Only his palm had become very warm at this time. His courage had been growing bigger and bigger recently. I pulled my hand out. "Ryan, don't take advantage of me." He looked at me amused. "Lie. You almost pulled my clothes off just now. So who's taking advantage of whom?" I was silent. It seemed that there was such a thing. These are all small matters. Unfortunately, we were photographed again. 13. It felt like there were people who knew us everywhere. It's just too absurd. Who took pictures of us on stakeout? The posts on the forum were updated again. This time, it was a photo of holding hands. Now, it's impossible to clear our names even if we jumped into the Yellow River. Whew. The forum was full of urgings for updates. Help. This. Kill me to cheer for you too. Adults should watch what adults should watch. Continue. I'm willing to open a membership. Ryan replied below. The photo is very beautiful. Thank you everyone. I made it my wallpaper. Zoe sent me a photo. It was a photo of her and Leo. The two people in the photo were all smiles and looked very happy. Just like countless passionate young couples. Sorry. When will you make an official announcement? I was a bit at a loss. Things seem to be really going in a strange direction. Everyone can always see that Ryan likes you. Can it be that only you can't see it? My head was like being hit by a grenade. What does it mean? Always. Like me? I always thought that we were just comrades in distress. Pure friendship. The kind where both people would save themselves first if they fell into the river. Help. Now that you put it this way, it seems that everything has a reasonable explanation. So, is this system here to help Ryan? System prompt. There is only one task left now. Finish it and you can be unbound. Tell me, quickly, what will be the last task? My heart suddenly became tense and couldn't stop beating wildly. Ryan sent a message. Why doesn't the heroine come out and take a few steps? 14. In the next few days. I was too ashamed to meet him. I also changed the route I usually took. Avoid him first. I always felt that this was a bit too intense. It's not that I dislike Ryan. Oh, in short, I just don't know what to say. The whole thing is just strange. Recently, my head always feels dizzy. I can't muster any energy to do anything. That day, after finishing my part-time job, it was already 9 o'clock in the evening. Just as I was about to go back to school, a figure darted out from an alley and blocked my way. Sorry. How many days have you been hiding? How long are you going to hide? Ryan's voice sounded beside my ear. He gradually approached me, and my back was immediately against the wall. I'm not hiding. I lowered my head and touched my nose. Then why do you dodge when you see me? You tell me. In this darkness. Ryan's eyes were like two jewels, always shining brightly. Ryan's breath was on me again. This familiar faint fragrance. Shall we give it a try? I won't force you. As long as you don't agree, I'll disappear. He looked at me seriously and blinked. We looked at each other for a while. In his eyes, I saw the story of our past dozen years. What does give it a try mean? I could only continue to pretend to be stupid. Sorry. Will you be my girlfriend? Task 10. Respond to him and follow your heart. This strange and perverted task system, at this time, suddenly became obedient. My heart couldn't stop beating. At this time, I need to make a choice myself. Sorry. Speak. This time, there is no system. 15. My pupils suddenly contracted. You actually know about this system too? He proudly raised his eyes, like a child eager to take credit. Piercing through this layer of Windows screen paper. This system is definitely to blame. This time you can have a choice. The two people were very close. As if they could hear each other's strong heartbeats. Can I not choose for now? His body blocked in front of me. I spoke weakly. In my heart, it seemed there was a choice. If you don't choose, we'll stay here all night. I'm willing. Oh. Being a rogue. I felt my face was very hot and there was like a flame burning in my heart. There was really nothing I could do about him. Then, give it a try? Ryan's eyes widened. After a few seconds of stunned. Thank you for being willing to come back to me. I took the initiative to kiss him. Okay. Forrest. Let's be good in the future. I said. The end of the main text extra chapter 1 after marriage. I saw Xavier once again. He was still dressed in a suit and full of energy. We were far apart and just nodded to each other and that was it. I heard that he got divorced again. I don't know why. Does even the fated heroine get tired? But it's not strange. Things that come on strong often go away quickly. Love at first sight is inherently deceptive. Those who can keep going are very lucky. Apparently, Xavier is not that lucky. Maybe he doesn't need this kind of luck either. For him, feelings are just the icing on the cake. It's not a pity without them. But looking at him being alone, I felt it was really a bit pitiful. Forrest pressed my head and pushed me into his arms. He said in an unhappy tone. Why are you looking so intently? What's there to see? I said in a muffled voice. Forrest. Forrest, what Forrest? We've been married for so long, and you still call me by my full name. It's okay if there's no nickname. But at least call me, husband, to make me feel good. Okay. I put my hand into his coat and hugged his waist. I whispered, "Husband." Extra chapter: DeForest doesn't have the habit of taking a nap. However, a few days ago, he went to another province for a meeting. After the meeting, he worked continuously for 2 nights at the company. He came home at noon today, ate something, and without even changing his clothes, he kicked off his shoes, then went to take a nap. While he was not sleeping deeply, I coaxed him and changed his pajamas and pants for him. I covered him with a quilt and stayed by the bed for a while. He had been outside for several days. Although he had been sending me messages and calling me, I forgot about him again this morning. I didn't remember that I was married to him. When I was washing up in the morning, I was wondering why there were 2 sets of toiletries on the counter. But I remembered later. Because Connor was running around at home and asking me when Dad would come home. I couldn't answer this morning. But now Dad has come home. I held Forrest's hand and felt a thick layer of calluses on his palm. I called him husband. He was asleep. But for some reason, he still mumbled hum in response. In the past, during the days when I was suffering from illness, he was not necessarily better off than me. He must have hated his own incompetence, resented the unfairness of fate, and must have tried every means. He even shamelessly borrowed money from people he didn't know well to treat my illness. But it was still a drop in the ocean compared to my surgery fees and medical expenses. Doing one's best often becomes a bit ridiculous in such life-saving situations. Helplessness is the reality. So, in the end, he had to accept his fate and cried and told me that he couldn't save me. I couldn't help but look at his palm. His suits and leather shoes are now custom made. When he goes out, he always keeps clean and fresh, takes care of his hair, has a proper smile, and behaves like a gentleman. But only the calluses on his palm told the truth. He has endured a lot to get to where he is today. To come back to me. I don't know how much longer I will be awake. But even if I become a confused person, as long as I'm still by his side, I won't feel like my life has come to a dead end as before. I lowered my head and secretly kissed his palm. Sleep well. In the afternoon, I was pruning the rose branches in the garden. He woke up, but he didn't make a sound when he came here. He was wearing white pajamas with the cuffs rolled up twice, revealing his strong forearms. His body, wrapped in the soft and wide pajamas, was actually slender and full of strength, often making me think of the wet pine trees that sway but stand firm during the rainy season. He just stood under the glass eaves of the garden, leaning against the door frame, and watching me with his arms folded. When I turned around and saw him, I didn't know how long he had been standing there. Maybe his eyes were too soft. I actually felt a bit embarrassed. So I quickly changed the topic. Look at these flowers you brought. They are all very delicate. I don't know if they can be kept alive. He suddenly smiled. Really? As he said this, he walked to my side. His fingers gently pushed my bangs behind my ear. It shouldn't be difficult. We have kept even more delicate things at home very well. He gently pinched and rubbed my earlobe, but I hope she is happier. I curved my eyes and pressed my face against his. I'm already very happy. Very happy. Very happy. Very happy. Very happy.